what up, guys? Welcome back. We are jumping into the DeMar DeRozan trade today, obviously leaving Chicago finally, and heading over to Sacramento. And this is honestly very, very exciting. Probably one of the not only just higher profile as far as talent level moves go, but the landing place and the team he's going to, I actually think that this can unlock quite a bit. It at least presents some degree of upside that I'm really excited to get into. First is DeMar's fit inside of Sacramento and some of the things that it unlocks or could unlock. As I mentioned a lot, offenses tend to tighten up quite a bit in the postseason. DeMar presents one of the most unstoppable release valves available in the NBA that is reserved for just a few very highly efficient mid-range masters. Of course, DeMar DeRozan, notorious. That's virtually where his office is. And it goes without saying, just innately, that level of upside for pretty much unstoppability if your matchups and, of course, just general shooting, getting in the zone, etc., that guys like Andrew Wiggins, Jonathan Kuminga for the Golden State Warriors, for example, I think is what they hope for or envision them aspiring to become, is that, ran a bunch of movement plays, didn't end up generating a quality shot. Oh, thank God we have DeMar DeRozan, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander mold of player. So as just an objective archetype, this is extremely, extremely helpful for the postseason. And that, again, is in addition to De'Aaron Fox already having made a name for himself as a prolific mid-range scorer, facilitator, and free throw generator. Next is DeMar's proven fit inside of a movement system coming out of Chicago with guys like Caruso, that flash, of course, that we had with Lonzo. I think at this point he has demonstrated his ability to come off DHOs, run around the perimeter of the three-point line, get himself a runway going downhill into his mid-range office or finishing at the rim, still taking the most number of shots at the rim to date, even at his age, tenure, all of that. So I think his fit inside of this Domantas Sabonis serving as the hub, the DHO action, relocating, giving the ball up, that kind of stuff, is going to fit relatively well. I also think he's a pretty underrated passer. I know we get those random, seemingly incredible highlight passes from the drive kickouts, from basically a 180 to the corner and those types of things. I would also just simply point to the fact that I feel like we've all slept on DeMar DeRozan since he left Toronto. But I think he's an underrated passer with a head of steam. And so you think about, again, the relocation, the off-ball movement that Sacramento clearly wants to own and make a part of its brand, already has. I think that's just going to perpetuate the system of, again, movement, drive, kicks, constant delivery of pressure points from a swath of different areas on the court. When you have a guy like DeMar DeRozan with his level of potency that's very widely known in the league, when he gets a downhill head of steam inside of that mid-range, it's just going to innately beckon a lot of attention from the defense while he's operating there. So in addition to Fox, you have a higher gravity guy getting downhill into his office where he operates typically. You're going to have to pay more attention to him when he's in that space, generating potentially cleaner looks from the outside, especially when you compound that with Sacramento's off-ball movement and that system of play. I think there's a pretty good chance, again, the quality of looks from the outside is going to be relatively improved. I think that's going to be great for lethal outside shooters like Malik Monk, but I think it's also going to help the guys on the team like Keegan Murray, Kevin Huerter, who had, for them, down years shooting from the outside. You can see a pathway here for him kind of helping jumpstart them back as very prolific and deadly shooters with his added gravity coming downhill off these DHOs. Thinking more broadly from the team level schematics perspective, I think adding a guy like DeMar DeRozan allows Sacramento to toggle more cleanly between a style of attack mimicking Indiana as well as your Boston and Oklahoma City, where Indiana famously known now for its off-ball movement, giving the ball up very quickly, relocating, finding open spots on the floor and prodding and poking at the defense, right? And then Boston, Oklahoma City, who are very, very wed to drive kicks, relocate that way, but pretty much perimeter oriented, maximizing the whole analytics game. In Oklahoma City's case, of course, they have Shai Gilgeous, who is the ultimate release valve inside of the mid-range. But Boston kind of lacks that a little bit. They do have, obviously, Tatum and Brown as far as solo initiators, but I think all of us are pretty acutely aware at this point they are really better optimized as a part of that ongoing system and continuing to propel it. Back to Sacramento now, they can play either way. Have your Keegans and Herders and Monks constantly sort of roaming on the perimeter, positioning themselves off of your DeMars and Foxes, attacking downhill pretty relentlessly, much similar to OKC and Boston. But you can also have wildly active and dynamic style of attack with quickly giving the ball up, kind of top to bottom stacked offensive roster where Fox is a threat, DeMar is a threat. Keegan has shown flashes of being able to attack closeouts too. Having those guys run the way they have, operating, of course, with Sabonis up near the break, offering the DHOs, the picks, giving them that much more space and a few steps on their guys, all of that to create the entryways for instigating that entire type of attack. And ultimately, you have a DeMar DeRozan and De'Aaron Fox offering that, again, release valve in the mid-range if nothing else is working. Kind of similar to your Oklahoma City. If you're not able to generate quality passes or whatever reason play has to reset, these are just incredible release valves to have at your disposal anyway. Next is the floor raiser and smoothing agent. I just came up with that word. So floor raiser, DeMar DeRozan led the league in minutes per game last year, and he has only missed a double-digit number of games twice in his 15 seasons in the NBA, which is nuts. So durability, incredible. You look at Fox, you look at Monk, injury assurance, and that is really, really, really important. Not too dissimilar to your Paul Georges with the Embiid and Maxey. We can all remember what happened last year, of course, with the Monk injury and then the Herter surgery, and obviously that severely mitigated their offensive potency. And on top of that, that smoothing agent idea, where now you have a little bit more flexibility lineup-wise. I think before, Sacramento was kind of pigeonholed into staggering lineups to allow either Sabonis or Fox to be on the floor basically every single minute. Now you can play around a little bit, particularly with a Monk-DeMar tandem on the offensive end. Don't have to be super, super worried in that sense. And then, of course, this is all under the broader umbrella of all these guys are just going to have smaller offensive loads. And so that's what I'll point to when you think about redistributing that energy to the defensive end, preserving DeMar's body at this stage of his career. Obviously, he's not the youngest chap in the schoolyard anymore. But again, if he's not on the hook to be ISOing every other play to create some form of offense, I think that's going to unlock more durability, sustainability, both physically and offensively at the team level. Next, the enablers/requirements for this bolstered offensive system and potency for the Sacramento Kings. Number one has to be the spacing and rhythmic balance between your DeMars and Foxes and Monks. Obviously, you have a non-shooting big in Domantas Sabonis, who's very, very proven at the facilitating aspect, reading the floor. When you have a lot of guys who like to get downhill to generate their own pressure and wreaking havoc on the defense, putting them in chokehold, you need to allow for decent spacing to prevent what Boston was able to do to Dallas in the finals and just let guys sit in the driving gaps regardless, because DeMar doesn't shoot from the outside a lot, and Fox, even though he's improved, hasn't proven he's an exceptional outside shooter that can command a ton of attention. That leads us to the Kings' three-point shooting. All of us knew when they had the most potent offense in the league 2 seasons ago now, particularly last year, we saw some very key guys take some steps back from the outside shooting potency. De'Aaron Fox, of course, comes first to mind. He is up to 37% as of last season from three, and that is up from 33% the year prior, so pretty appreciable, and that honestly matters a lot because he'll be playing a lot. Keegan Murray took a step back last year, clocking in at 36%, and that's down from 41% his freshman year, rookie year. Kevin Herter, everybody's aware of. He finished with around 36%, even though he's a career 39-40% guy. We'll see how that surgery plays out. Trey Lyles as well. He's going to be very impactful coming in to backfill that power forward position. He finishes at 38%. Those, to me, were the key guys that are going to have to demand outside attention to stretch the defense apart and open up those driving lanes for your DeMars and Fox, the last enabler is the power forward position. Something I didn't even realize was that Keegan Murray only played at the 4 15% of the time last year. The on-off differential with him on the floor at that position was only 45th percentile. I talked about this before, but this power forward position is absolutely paramount in the modern league. Sarr and Ricochet come into the league. Stretch fours, have guard-like skills, can shoot. Jason Tatum is making the most money in the league. It isn't just for the, oh my God, Lauri Markkanen is so good at shooting, we have to have him. And oh my God, PJ Washington, we're pretty sure he's good. Okay, awesome. But you have to defend. You have to defend at a very, very high level. And even more so, you have to be versatile and adapt. That's where we get into the defensive question marks surrounding the Kings going into next season. Because defending Karl Anthony Towns, extremely different than trying to guard Aaron Gordon. Different from guarding PJ Washington. That is still even different from guarding Jason Tatum. Who is going to start at that power forward position? I think obviously losing Harrison Barnes in this deal means Keegan Murray is going to have to step in to that slot. And again, only played 15% last year, was not the most potent, especially defensively, which is going to be key. His physical profile at 6'8", being that young, having that high of a motor, it matters a lot. But we're talking about a third-year guy. I don't really know how much confidence I have in his ability to match up in those scenarios. And even worse than that, I'm also not sure about Trey Lyles. I know as far as that stretch 4, being able to knock down at least open shots, which as I've mentioned, I think they're going to generate more open shots with more of this downhill pressure. The defense is really, really the question here. If Keegan Murray can take a jump defensively, I think that is literally the optimal scenario for the Kings, even more so than fixing that offensive potency from the three-point line, where dropped about 5 percentage points last year as opposed to the previous one. You have to be able to contain these stampeding rhinoceroses in Karl Anthony Towns, Aaron Gordon, close space very quickly in the weak side corner for PJ Washington. Now you have Chet, who is literally 7'1", with an outside shooting threat, is, I'm sure, going to be crashing the boards, something that Oklahoma City desperately needs to improve. If you can't meaningfully slow him down from getting putbacks at his size and length, it's going to be really tough. Even though Domantas Sabonis did finish in the 96th percentile in terms of defensive rebounding, I just really, really think that power forward position is the most important role in the NBA, and there definitely are some question marks surrounding Keegan Murray's viability, particularly on the defensive end. The defensive portion of the equation here. And it's why I truly believe that Keon Ellis needs to be in the starting and closing lineups. Closing, probably unclear. But what Sacramento has been missing for the last 2 years for a franchise that has struggled mightily is a guy who has built his brand around taking pride on the defensive end of the floor. They didn't have a single guy who overtly and clearly took pride on that end of the floor, ultimately just leads to bleeding points. And you see how much the amount of pressure it puts on the offensive guys to be constantly delivering. True for every single team, of course. But you need at least somebody to take some degree of pride and ownership, even in the backcourt of that domain. Ellis's very clear tenacity, as well as some degree of switchability on the defensive end, I think is absolutely invaluable. And then in addition to that, by the end of Sacramento's 2-game postseason run in the play-in last year, I felt super comfortable with Keon Ellis with the ball. Seriously. Proved some degree of offensive potency when it came to shot making, and in my opinion, most importantly, he proved himself to have some playmaking chops as a secondary facilitator and playmaker while being a very low maintenance guy. He's not going to be worried about shots at all, but it seems like he can generate some degree of open looks for others, and again, is not going to make costly plays. No turnovers, no 4 shots. He's just going to be making the glue guy plays that ultimately feed into winning games, exactly like your Alex Caruso and exactly like your Derek White. Tweeted during their play-in series last year, he's like the Derek White of the West. The guy just flies around, has an insane nose for the ball defensively, extremely low maintenance offensively, more than willing to go off ball, proven ability to be a secondary facilitator, even in high pressure environments. And then when he is the recipient of looks and kickouts, at least confident enough to hit it at a decent enough clip where guys can't sag off of him, and he can generate points for his own team. Even though Keon Ellis, making a name for himself, defense first guy, able to hold his weight on the offensive end of the floor, he's not a Jason Tatum or Herb Jones. He's not able to switch, right, 1 through 4, obviously. So that ultimately leads me to believe that Sacramento probably has to do what Oklahoma City did last year, where they employed this wild beehive swarming mechanism of, we're all going to be undersized, but we're all going to be way too fast and quick as far as reading passing lanes and getting our hands to dislodge balls. And the moment the ball is slightly dislodged, we're going to have 3 fucking guys like dive on top of you and rip the ball from you, which also reminds me of a thing that I feel like nobody kind of talks about, which is, do smaller guys really get called for as many defensive fouls when you think about ripping the ball and running? I don't know, not really. So that's just an idea. Not to mention De'Aaron Fox was like 2nd or 3rd in the league in steals per game. Kind of have that a little bit of the J-Dub SGA kind of dynamic there with Ellis and Fox. Both these guys, very, very great hands, very quick reflexes, prioritize transition scoring, getting mismatches where you can, and then of course, prioritizing quality shot creation to eliminate the need to offensively rebound. You need to create quality looks if you're undersized because you're not really going to rebound that much. And, you know, these are just ideas and concepts I would just offer up to them. I think ultimately this is a team that's going to understand they're going to be at a disadvantage on that end of the floor, but it can't be a thing where you feel pretty much walked over and back to the cycle of, oh my God, if our offense isn't going nuclear, then we're screwed because we literally can't stop anything anyway. The similarities with OKC kind of jump out to me with a guy like Ellis, getting him in there at the 2, potentially even the 3, depending on the matchup, and getting a guy like Monk or Herter in there as well. I really think that there's some opportunity there. Overall, the offensive dexterity is absolutely better with a guy like DeMar DeRozan, reinforcing the downhill and mid-range pressure that De'Aaron Fox has made widely known in the league. It's also going to generate more quality looks from the outside, which guys like Kevin Huerter, Keegan Murray could use to get themselves going after down years shooting from the outside. Being that floor raiser, being basically an Iron Man in the league, it's just insane how few games this guy and DeMar DeRozan ever misses, not to mention how few bad games DeMar DeRozan has. You don't get these random Paul George games of like 15 points or something. DeMar, with enough touches and enough green light, is just going to score enough points for that consistent offensive pressure on the defenses they're going up against. I think that's going to matter a lot, as well as the smoothing agent of unlocking different lineups. You know, if you're able to rest Fox and Sabonis together and allow DeMar, Malik Monk, these other guys in there and stagger some lineups, so you're not constantly worried about, oh my God, do we have Sabonis and Fox in? Oh my God, if not, we need to fix it. There are just going to be some enablers or requirements to unlock that added offensive potency and dexterity come the playoffs. Number one, of course, is going to be the spacing component, needing those guys from the outside to establish themselves as real threats, so guys can't just clog the driving lanes against DeMar as well as De'Aaron Fox. Drive, kick, then get the fuck out of the way, relocate, principles that Mike Brown has employed and integrated into the Sacramento Kings style of play. For me, the most important puzzle piece remaining, like virtually every team in the NBA, is that power forward position. This is unbelievable at this point how essential getting a versatile defensive guy into that role is, given how incredibly diverse and potent the opposing power forwards in the Western Conference alone are. You got to be able to stop Aaron Gordon from detonating at the rim, but you also got to sprint out on the weak side corner to stop PJ Washington, get shouldered in the fucking face by Karl Anthony Towns as he flings himself towards the rim. Like, this is really tough. Ultimately, the Kings are absolutely a better team, even with the loss of Harrison Barnes, but they have not addressed that latent issue that we've all been aware of for the past 2 seasons. All right, guys, that's all for today. Thanks again, and until next time. Bye.